Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hi, Sophie. Welcome to another episode of Third Eye Awakening. Today is a module from a program that I ran live back in December of 2020 called 5D Magic and Manifestation. It was a good program. It was 14 solid days of content all around manifestation. And I've decided to share this particular module with you because I feel like it's such a beneficial way of understanding some of the energetics of manifestation, meaning the energetic patterns that we experience as we learn to manifest things. Now, I don't mean to brag, but I am a really, really good manifester. You'll hear me talk about the kitchen in my previous house that I just hated, and the way that interacting with this kitchen was preventing me from manifesting my dream house. But I have since gone on to manifest my dream house. And when I finally, when that piece clicked, I just want you to know that, even though I'm an amazing manifester, I still have resistance. I still have fear. I have all the human feelings, everything in my nervous system that you all feel. And some pieces are harder to master than others. And this frickin' kitchen in this previous home was just like a thorn in my side, and it drove me crazy on the daily, multiple times a day, because I love to cook and I spend a lot of time in the kitchen. But anyway, when I finally was able to switch up my perspective around the kitchen and any other little lingering nigglies, I didn't want to leave my neighbor. I love the neighbor that we had there. But when I kind of let that go too, I manifested this home that we live in now so freaking fast. It was absurd how fast it was. Everything worked smoothly. Everything was so easy. Nicest landlord. Literally, I am living my dream life. This is my dream house. It's in the country. It's surrounded by trees and fields, and there's water close by. There's birds everywhere. There's deer, there's cows. We're overlooking the bay. We can see the bay from our front porch. It's all fenced in, so my children are safe. It's the home that I had dreamed of since I was a little girl. I always wanted to be a farmer's wife. That was actually what I said when people asked me when I was 4 years old what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I am a farmer's wife now. Now, mind you, it's a very small farm. We live on a farm, and somebody else farms the fields. But we have our modest little vegetable garden and our flower gardens, and we have a collection of bunnies that we farm. We have a little rabbitry. Someday we will expand to chickens and a goat or two. But the point is that you heard me using my kitchen as an example, and I bumped up against it for 3 years. And then finally, I was able to adjust my mental perspective around it, and whoosh, in came a new house. So fast, just like that. Honestly, just like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. It's got a lot of value in it. I absolutely love manifestation. And on the topic of manifestation, I want to share with you some things that I have cooking up. I have been working behind the scenes, coming up with, as you know, because I've mentioned a couple times before, I've created a store on my website where I've broken up several of my programs, and they are super low cost, super accessible. Things like psychic development, mastering the human ego, the shape of the universe and your place within it, all of my light codes, all of those things are available on my website in the store section. But I also have been creating and channeling some very exciting new things. So here are some opportunities that I have for you to change your fucking life by working with me. And I say that in total earnest. Like, the shit that is channeling through me these days is so, it blows my mind on the daily. I'm not joking. Okay, so I have this, I have learned the step beyond manifestation. It's called timeline encoding. And it's essentially a process of creating your highest timeline and encoding it into your blueprint within your holographic field at all the levels: your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body, your etheric body, your holographic field, so that every aspect of you is encoded with this timeline, so that you're not just manifesting one thing at a time. I mean, you can do that if you want. It's dope. That's what this episode is about. But if you're like, let's just go for the whole damn thing, the whole thing, I have been shown how to do that. And so I have a couple of opportunities for you if this piques your curiosity. Number one is that I've created a course called Creation Codes, wherein I teach you how to do this, and I'll walk you through the whole process. It's just very cool information. There's a lot more to it as well, but it's on pre-sale right now, which means that it's 50% off. It's the lowest price it will ever be. And it is on pre-sale until June 13th. So a week, basically. You have 7 days to get in it on pre-sale. And pre-sale means I don't have the sales page up yet. I'm not giving you all the information. I'm not even showing you the graphics or anything like that. I'm just telling you what it is. It is creating an entire new reality for yourself, not just manifesting one or two items at a time, but completely designing and encoding the life that you desire to live. So you can join me in that course on pre-sale, as I said, until June 13th, 2022, after which it will go up to early bird pricing, and then it will go up to regular pricing. And that is going to be either in August or September. I think it's going to be in August, but we'll see. Summer is sacred, in my opinion. Summer's for days at the beach. Either way, I'm so excited about it. So I think I'm probably going to start it in August. The other thing is that if you want to go all in and you want to do this process together and you want it to be like highly tailored and customized to you specifically, like in Creation Codes, the course, I walk you through the process so you could do it yourself. But I also have a package available. It's a holographic timeline encoding package where you can come to work with me one-to-one over a 6-week period. And we have a number of sessions wherein we craft your timeline and we go through, do the energy work, the adjustment, anything that needs to happen in order to bring yourself into high resonance with it. We encode it into your field. We hold the encoding, and I create several things for you to support you in like integrating it and locking it in. I've been doing this with a couple of people behind the scenes, and I've been working on it myself, and it has been incredibly powerful. I did it on myself first. I was essentially shown how to do it for myself, and the things that are happening, like the opportunities, the people that I'm meeting, people who are reaching out to book me on their podcast, the things like that that are coming up, that I have done nothing on the action plane to orchestrate those. I just encoded my timeline and it's all falling into place. So if you want more information about that, hit me up in my inbox, either my email or direct message me on Instagram or Facebook, and I will make sure that I get back to you. And without any further ado, and 1212 has a couple spaces opening up for re-enrollment in July. I will talk to you more about that on the next episode, but just keep your little earsies open for that too. Without any further preamble, I will now let you listen to Devil's Snare and Boggarts, all about manifestation. Love you, beautiful soul fan. I want to talk about Devil's Snare and Boggarts, or in normal human language, resistance and fear. I love using, my kitten's popping up on the desk. I love using Harry Potter analogies because I just feel like they're so good. And in this particular case, they do better than my words to explain the energy of resistance and fear. Hello, I'm a little shit, but I'm such a cute little shit. Okay, so resistance. What do I mean by that? I mean, resistance is a couple different things. When I originally planned out this module, I was thinking about resistance to our current circumstances, but resistance also applies to the things that we desire to experience. But all resistance is, I mean, exactly how it sounds. It's that feeling within us that is trying to push something away. So a really obvious example would be like a very recent one for me. If you're really unhappy in your job, you do not want to be doing it anymore. You're wanting to manifest something else, like a more soul aligned job or career, but you're wanting to manifest it from a space of hating your current job. And there's nothing wrong with really disliking or even hating your current job. There's nothing wrong with it. But when you are in that resistance where you're trying to push it away and you're trying to escape it, you're putting a lot of attention on it and you're making it even more real to you. And you're also activating a whole bunch of negative emotions, such as, by negative, I mean not the ones you want to manifest from. Okay. So, such as scarcity, fear, entrapment. Yeah. Like being imprisoned or any kind of feeling of lack of freedom. I think those are really good examples for that. But like, say if you say, I have resistance to my current kitchen in the house that I live in, it's relaxing. But okay, here's the thing. It's a galley kitchen, first of all. Hideous 70s vinyl flooring. And it's just not like the colors aren't nice, the decor isn't nice, but I live in a rental. But the worst part, like I could deal with all that, whatever. The worst part is that, so the fridge is beside the stove, and they're both like next to the wall. So it's the fridge, it's the stove, and then it's this small amount of counter space. Then it's the sink, and then it's a larger amount of counter space. But the way the flow works is like you can only reasonably chop vegetables and stuff on that small amount of counter space between the stove and the sink, because when you're chopping vegetables, you need to put it like usually, in a fryer on the stove or something like that. But that's also where your dishes accumulate as you're like making dirty dishes. Anyway, it does not work. The flow of it is ridiculous and totally inefficient. It's very frustrating to somebody who really likes homemaking and like, feeding my family and feeding myself and things like that. So I have resistance to that kitchen. And when I try to manifest a new place to live out of resistance to that kitchen, what it does is activate those feelings of being trapped, those feelings of being frustrated, those feelings of being angry, those feelings of like not, having what I need in order to have the experience that I desire. And it's not wrong to feel those things, but those are not the emotions that I want to manifest from. So resistance to me is like the perfect analogy is Devil's Snare in Harry Potter. It's in the Chamber of Secrets. Yes, the Chamber of Secrets. And it's one of the three, I don't know, like trap thing or like whatever, like spells that the professors have built to guard the Philosopher's Stone, which is hidden away. So if anybody tries to break in, they encounter these different things and they're like booby traps, kind of like wizardry booby traps. And devil's snare is a magical plant that starts to coil around you and tighten, and like you get stuck. It's like a spider web of your nightmares, but there's no spider. The web is the scary thing. And Hermione remembers that there's this little rhyme about devil's snare, how the more you try to fight it, the tighter the coils get. And if you just surrender and stop fighting, it releases you and you just fall right through, or you're able to like pull yourself out or whatever. But in the case of the Harry Potter movies, they fall through to the ground underneath. And I feel like that's the perfect analogy for resistance, because the more that we try to fight the things that we don't like, and by fight, I just mean like feel frustrated, feel like activated in our anger and all the crummy emotions it brings up in us, the more we attention we pay to it, the more like fuel we add to that fire, and the more real it becomes, the more prevalent it becomes. So we essentially just manifest more and more of those feelings. The more we fight our circumstances, the more we resist them, the more solid they become, the more solid in our experience. Because you got to kind of remember that, like, and I know this is probably a little bit tricky for some people to understand. It took a while for me to understand it, but the physical matter in our lives is not actually that physical. And furthermore, it's not the only information that is available to us to translate into reality. But the more we focus on it, the more physical it becomes by virtue of our focus and our observation. So it's kind of like we are creating it to be more and more solid. The more we pay attention to it, it's like the realer it gets, the realer it becomes. And one way of imagining it is like, I don't know if this will mean anything to you if you're not a photographer. I'm not really a photographer, but I have used DSLR cameras. And, any camera that requires you to focus your lens on your subject is a really good analogy, because if you just use it on auto setting, point and shoot, you just hold up your camera and look through the viewfinder and just like take a picture, and you don't do any adjusting or focusing, you're going to get a really flat, bland picture. There's not going to be any exciting focal point. There's not going to be any real depth to it that like draws the viewer in and makes it a stunning photograph. If you pick a subject, like let's say a bee on a flower, and you focus in on that bee, the more you focus in on it, the more sharp and detailed and vivid the bee and the flower become, and the more blurred everything else around it becomes. And that's what it's like with resistance and our focus at all, ever, at any time. And also, then you take an amazing, thrilling, beautiful picture. So when we focus our attention on anything, it becomes more detailed, more bright, more vivid. It becomes the focal point of our focusing, of our experience. And the other things, the other information around it becomes more blurry. It's less focused. It's softer. It just doesn't register with us as much. So that's why people talk about the power of gratitude practices. I just think that they don't do a good job at explaining these parts. This is what I'm good at. So a gratitude practice helps us to shift our focus away from the things that are pissing us off and that we have resistance to, shifting our focus to the things that we're really happy about. And then we intensify and magnify those physical things, but we also intensify and magnify those emotions. And we magnetize to ourselves more and more things that match those emotions because they already exist. they're all there around us sometimes they're already physically manifested and we're just suddenly noticing them. And sometimes they're not physically manifested yet and we're drawing them in and translating them ourselves. But that's the beauty of shifting our focus. That's why it's so powerful. And when we focus on what we are resisting, we equally not only intensify and magnify those physical things in our external life that seem to be, triggering those feelings, but we also magnify those feelings and then we magnetize to ourselves more external things that match those feelings. Resistance can also apply to things that we desire but don't believe that we have or we can have. So if you think of an area where you're trying to manifest something, you desire it, you know how you want to feel, blah, 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 and it just doesn't seem to be coming very fast. It's probably because there's just areas where like your brain and your stories can't fucking get behind it. And that's fine. I don't want to get too far into this because it kind of leads into tomorrow, but like basically, instant manifestation does happen for sure. It's completely possible. But a lot of the time we're just making incremental shifts and we can feel that resistance. We can feel the ways that part of us doesn't believe it's possible. Or it doesn't believe it's possible for us. And we can feel how we are thereby repelling the thing that we desire because it can't come in, like we have a barrier to it through that resistance. And it's the same thing. The more that you buy into those, beliefs that cause that feeling of resistance, the more you amplify them through your attention and the more real they seem, even though they aren't objectively real, they're subjectively real. And you can change your subjective perspective anytime that you want. So a personal example would be, sorry, a personal example for me would be money. Like that is really, this is the one that's the hardest for me. And like I said, in the money section, I am making progress. I'm making fast progress. I'm super happy with my progress, but it takes a lot of work and I can feel how much resistance is there. I can feel it. So what it looks like for me is as I'm calling in a certain amount of money every month, I can feel all the ways that my psyche does not believe that's possible for me. I've already talked about the beliefs of like, who do I think I am? How dare I? Blah, blah, blah. But it's even just beliefs of like, I've never felt that before, so I don't think it's real for me. Or what's another one? They're usually pretty vague. Like it takes some work to figure out what belief is behind them. Another one is like people in my part of like in the town that I live in and the personal like circumstances that I have don't make that much money. Or, you've never been good with money, so you're just going to fuck it up anyway. Like it's like that kind of stuff, right? And those things are just hanging around in there and they're creating resistance so that when I think about the thing that I want to manifest, I can feel like, ugh, that's my best description. Like, oh, there's just this ucky thing that comes up. And that's where I just went for a walk and I was wearing a hat and it totally like buggered up my hair. Anyway, that's where it comes into play to do that work that I was talking about the other day, where you just explore it. You follow that thread. You kind of like go like, what's that about? And you follow it, follow the thread, and all of a sudden you come to a knot and you're like, oh, and you kind of pull the knot apart, loosen it up, and just figure out what's there and lean into it. And don't make yourself wrong for feeling resistance. It's just an indicator, but don't fight against it, because when you make yourself wrong and you fight against it, you can't shift it. You can't shift it. The only way to shift it is to relax and just like lean into it and let it not mean anything about you. So in the case of like my kitchen, I'm really learning to get into this Zen place and just relax and be like, it's fine. Like, I'm not always going to be here. We're going to find somewhere else to live and we're going to move. And I'm going to miss this place because I always miss the places that I've lived after I move. And like, it's fine. And look, I'm still cooking. I'm still making my sourdough starter and I'm still, making these cookies and whatever. And it's not ideal, but it's okay. And I'm also appreciating how much this is clarifying for me the importance of a kitchen with a window that looks like outside, not just into a garage, because mine does. And also like to have good flow and counter space and all that, right? So like, it's just not like I used to get so frustrated in the kitchen. And now I'm relaxing a lot more. And I can feel how that brings me into my heart space, brings me into the now moment, and allows the universe to be rearranging things, behind the scenes, so to speak, in my favor. And the more I can release that resistance, like it hasn't fully released yet, but the more I release the resistance and get to a place where I'm like, actually, I love this kitchen. And I just feel no attachment to any of this at all whatsoever, then that'll probably be when like, oh, hey, a perfect opportunity to move comes up. And then in terms of resisting the things that, we actually want, it's about following that process of just exploring it, whatever, and like knowing that there's a whole bunch of clarity on the other side of exploring it and that your feelings of resistance aren't your enemy. But if you resist your resistance, you're like double, entrapping yourself in double snare. Just let it go. Just relax. Just let it be there. Let yourself feel what you're feeling. There's nothing wrong with you and you're not ruining your manifestation. But if you keep trying to push it away, you're sure going to slow it down and you're going to manifest shit you don't actually want in the meantime. And then also it's like, what was I going to say? When you're resisting the thing that you want, oh yeah, that's where it's so useful to come back to like, what were the original feelings that I put down on my original list at the new moon ceremony that I want to feel, and tune into those feelings. Just tune into those. Remember that it's not about the thing. So, if you're wanting to manifest, like, if you're wanting to manifest a new house, it's not really about the house. It's about how you want to feel. That's what everything is about. How you want to feel. So if you just tune into the feelings now, you can instantly feel better, even if you have resistance. Whether it's resistance to your current circumstances or it's resistance to your own resistance around, what you want to manifest. It helps you to detach from your like fixation on the thing, the specific thing, and it brings you back just into like the feeling state. So that's resistance, aka double snare. Now, Boggarts, fear and Boggarts. So this was so interesting when I figured this out. So our clever brains, like I've said before, are designed to gather data based on our experiences and interpret information and basically try and predict dangers up ahead and keep us alive. That is what our brain does. And our clever brains, the only objective is to keep us safe and alive. It's the only objective that our brain truly has, which is why it wants to know everything. It wants to know how. It wants to control everything. Like it wants everything to be linear and clear so that it can analyze that data and it can look ahead and predict Am I going to get hurt? Am I going to die? That's what your brain wants to do. Unfortunately, there's no way your brain can interpret all the data. And it also, like any attempts to basically kowtow to our brain's obsession with, knowing everything and controlling everything, takes so much of the beauty and the magic and the mystery out of everything. I mean, it's still there, but we're not experiencing it. So, nuts to that. So, our brains will generate fears to keep us safe. And they're like Boggarts or boogeymen. They will, this is especially true anytime that we are up leveling. And whenever you're manifesting, I mean, that's really just up leveling. You might have heard it's kind of like a buzz term in the New Age community and the like personal development community is like, oh, what would my next level self do? And it's a real thing because there's always a new version of you. You're always growing and changing all the time. All the time. You are constantly shifting into new versions of yourself, and it's an amazing thing. Your identity is in flux all the time. So why not reach for like your next level self, like the self that's like, moved through limitations and moved through fears and has manifested, things that we desire, right? So where was I going with that? Whenever you're up leveling or manifesting something that you desire, if you have any part of your nervous system that says this is unfamiliar and therefore unsafe, your brain will sabotage you with fears in an effort to keep you in your zone of predictability. So your brain would love it if you would never grow, because as long as you never grow, it can ensure that you're safe. It's like the ultimate helicopter parent. It wants you to stay in your zone of predictability and safety so that it wants you to stay in your playpen, basically, so that, it can be sure that you're safe. It can be sure, which is all an illusion anyway, because none of us are safe here on Earth. That's just part of the package deal. So, Buzz Killington over here. So, our brain wants to keep us in our playpen. And every time we think about like standing up and being like, oh, I'm an actual grown ass adult, like I could climb out of this playpen, our brain will create a fear. Sometimes it creates a fear internally just on the level of an imaginary fear. Sometimes it will actually concoct a fear manifesting itself in order to like snap us back into like the safety of our playpen and being like, oh my God, you're right. I should stay in my playpen and never leave. I'm only 39. Why would I leave my playpen? Anyway, so when I first really realized this was that what happened, right? I started making money in my business and I was still working as a midwife, but it was like the beginnings of feeling like, oh my God, I can really do this. I had already turned down an extended contract to stay and keep working as a midwife. So I already knew that like I was not carrying on, but I was still not confident in myself. I still had so many doubts about being capable of having a business. That was a big shadow thing for me, like feeling incapable. Um, so my brain like really wanted me to stay safe. It did not want me to be embarrassed. It did not want me to talk about any of this kind of stuff: magic, manifestation, spirituality, soul work, the Akashic records, all the things that I love to talk about. It was like, you shut up, because you need to stay safe and alive, and people will make fun of you and ostracize you, and you don't know what you're doing anyway, and you're going to fail, and you just shut your mouth and stay in your playpen and be safe. So that's what my brain was doing. And I was overriding it. I was deciding, no, I'm going to go for it anyway. And I had started making money in my business. Not a ton of money, but I had started doing readings and getting paid for them. And it felt really, really good. And once I got to a certain amount of money and like had started to build some momentum, my brain manifested my car breaking down. It needed a new I think it ended up just being the battery, but my husband thought it was the alternator. So we bought an alternator and a battery. Anyway, doesn't matter. It was a big expense. And I just remember being like, interesting, interesting. Why did this happen now? Of course, I could have assumed, as I probably have many times over many such fear concocted scenarios, that it was just life being random and lifey. But instead, I kind of like really, really investigated it and kind of started to realize, like, oh, that's my fear showing me that life is unpredictable and unpredictable expenses come up. And the safe thing to do is to stay in my predictable job where I am going to get a guaranteed paycheck every month so that I can afford these things. That's what's happened here. That's what it is. And then a couple weeks later, I had another fear manifest. I don't remember what it was, but it was something like when I finally had time to work on my business, somebody, I don't know, it was like they called an emergency meeting at our midwifery practice group and it was mandatory and I had to go even though it was my day off. And it was kind of like something sabotaging me externally, seeming to sabotage me externally. And it was reflecting my time scarcity stuff and the feeling of like, you're never going to be able to do this. And then I also had a scenario come up where all of a sudden I was afraid that like there was just some circumstances that's kind of like triggered a fear that Alex might like cheat on me with his ex, which he would never do. But it was so interesting because it like there was no, I mean, there was no actual, this was all an imaginary one. There was no actual thing. It was just like a set of circumstances whereby my brain could take it and run with it. You know what I mean? Um, so there was no anything actually going on in the real world. But my brain just all of a sudden was like, oh my God, he could cheat on you, blah, 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 blah. And I realized, like, oh, it's because I'm investing in myself and I'm spending more money on myself and I'm choosing to, up level, move into my next level. And my brain is trying to sabotage me and take me back down. And it's so weird because this has nothing to do with like business or money, but it's everything to do with insecurity. The nice thing was that I learned that those fears aren't triggering anymore. So my brain had to come up with something else. But I was just like, whatever. Like if he cheats on me, it'll suck and I'll feel betrayed and heartbroken, but like life will go on. Anyway. So all of those to say, like I started to figure out that none of these things were random. None of them were random. They were all in perfect match with ways that I was choosing to grow and show up for myself and move beyond the boundaries of that playpen. And P.S., every time you climb out of the playpen, your brain creates a new playpen. Like first it panics. It absolutely freaks the fuck out because it has no data about the rest of the world. But then after a while, it starts to accumulate data and it calms down again and it just constructs a new playpen. So we're always up leveling. We're always moving out of that playpen into a bigger world, in a bigger realm. And our brain freaks out every time, every time. So basically, fear is like Boggarts. It's like something that shapeshifts to take the form of whatever is going to probably do the best job at keeping you in your playpen. And it's easy to think of fear as an enemy or an inconvenience, and it is kind of an inconvenience, but really when we remember that it's there for our survival, and it just doesn't actually know the difference between like things that aren't actually a big deal, like deciding to like invest in a mentor and spend money on yourself and leave your job to pursue the business that you have always wanted to do. Like that's not actually a big deal and that's not going to lead to my death, right? But my brain interprets it that way. It totally does. So I could be mad at my fears, or I could recognize that it's just part of my programming, like my innate programming, though, like my human body nervous system programming this avatar in order to keep me alive and in the game for as long as possible. But as soon as I see it as a Bogart and I kind of call it for what it is, and again, like I loved in Harry Potter that the counter spell, sorry, I'm pregnant, all right? The counter spell is just, wave your wand and say, ridiculous. And then it would turn into something that makes you laugh. And then, the Bogart becomes powerless. And it's really the same process. Like, I don't really ever get them to make me laugh, but I do end up laughing at myself. And I'm like, wow, brain, like, well played, but also well met. Like, I'm not falling for this. And it takes the edge off. It takes the intensity off, and it allows us to move through it. And some triggers are really triggering, of course, really triggering, but it's okay if you need support for your triggers. Like if you've been through really intense things and those fears feel more like PTSD rather than just like fears like I described, then please get yourself support, but also know that you don't have to be held back by that. I also have PTSD, and I know a lot of people who have PTSD, and it just doesn't have to hold you back. It doesn't have to sabotage your manifestations. You just learn how to deal with your triggers so that they don't, completely knock the wind out of you every single time. But even if they do, that's okay too. As soon as you adopt the attitude of curiosity towards your fears and kind of remember that they're Boggarts and your triggers are Boggarts furthermore, and you stop seeing them as working against you and instead you see them as working for you, then it helps, or working with you, but I don't know, I think they're working for me. It really helps to realign, and even better than realign, it's like more accurately align, more completely align with your desired manifestations and your soul, basically. So I say that our triggers are working for us because they are just bringing to the surface shit that is like it's already in there, right? So every time it gets triggered, we get the opportunity to sort of like feel it and cope our way through it and eventually thrive our way through it. And it's kind of like a homeopathic, like super diluted exposure many times. The more triggered we get and the more we kind of like breathe our way through our triggers and return to our heart and give ourselves grace and love and like lots of self-care, the more we bring curiosity, the less powerful those triggers are. Like they lose their charge. But if every time we're triggered, we freak out and we run away from them, they don't ever get the chance to release their charge. So the thing is, you just got to see your triggers. Like, if you had so for my example, I have PTSD around having previously been in a physically abusive relationship. It was a long time ago, and for the most part, I don't even think about it. I literally don't even care. It doesn't faze me. The person that I was with, like occasionally I'll still see him. It doesn't faze me. It's fine. What phases me is when people around me, especially people I live with. So my mom has an explosive temper and Alex has an explosive temper. And they're both like, they would never hurt anybody ever. But they just get so mad that it fills up the space. And that triggers the shit out of me every time. Like I'll lock myself in the bathroom and cry. It just is so triggering. But every time it happens and I can breathe into it, I remember like I guess that scenario, like I'm not in physical harm right now. Like I'm okay. I'm safe. That's not the same thing. And then I can sort of like thank my triggers because it's giving me an opportunity to release some of that charge. And it does release, like it's much much better than it used to be. And I didn't figure this out until just a few years ago. So it's taken a while. But anyway, so our fears are like Boggarts. They will shapeshift and do whatever it takes to keep us in our playpen, because that's their mandate. And it's okay. And we just don't have to listen to it. We just receive the fears and we say, that's interesting, curious, I wonder why. And then we just let it go. And if it actually manifests in our physical world, we explore it and be like, why did that happen? And, then again, we just delight in finding more of ourselves, basically. There's just always more of you to be experienced. So our fears are Boggarts. Our resistance is devil's snare. You have the power. You always have the power. You always are in power. You have the power over your resistance. You have the power over your fears. As soon as you can see them both as kind of being like illusions, like the realist feeling illusions, but illusions nonetheless, and return to your power, the quicker everything rearranges to reflect that fact. And also the sooner you return to being in alignment with your desired manifestations, and the sooner they manifest into your life. Okay. That's it for tonight. Tomorrow is about quantum leaping, instant manifestation, and not so instant manifestation, and divine timing. I'm very excited about it. And then the night after that, you guys, is the full moon, and it's the full moon ceremony. So excited. Okay. Lots of love. Bye. Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode. I appreciate you more than my words could ever say. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you on the next episode.